Hello again, Steve here. I've been away for a few days for sure for making a video. I took ill. I hope it was just the flu. Hopefully, I didn't catch something more serious. Was in Mexico for about a week and came back and fell ill, pretty harshly ill. I haven't been sick in years. I'm really fortunate that way. But boy, did it put me on my backside. But anyway, yeah. Well, I'll try to keep more steady pace with the video content from now on, though, now that I'm feeling a bit better. Today I wanted to talk about this whole Trump omnibus thing, because I actually touched on this about exactly a year ago. About exactly a year ago, I did a video, which you can look up. It was March 11th, 2017, and it was called, "Will the whole, quotations, Trump thing, quotations, end in tears?" And in there I talked about my assessment of what Trump is and was, which is that fundamentally he is a socialist. He's a big authoritarian government guy who will manage authoritarian socialism better than, say, a Clinton will. And my assessment of why he would is because he's more experienced. I mean, he's been a guy who's run big organizations for all of his life. So if experience means something, then he's got a better track record, whereas somebody like Clinton has never run anything. And the things that she has run have been an unmitigated disaster and completely fraught with fraud. So where Trump ran primarily in a, if not a free market, a fascist / quasi-free market, where he had to perform in terms of keeping things above board and whatnot. So therefore my assessment was, and I think I'm correct on that, I could be wrong in the end, but I think I am correct on that he's a pretty decent manager, experienced manager, and is an intelligent manager. He's got a good ear for, figuring whether this is the right move or not. I mean, everybody has their failures. Show me an entrepreneur in life who hasn't had failures, and he has had his failures, but a very low percentage. I mean, a couple of bankruptcies over the course of hundreds of businesses is actually a very small number of bankruptcies. But interesting, in that video that I did over a year ago, I talked about how Trump was he wanted $1 trillion in military spending, and it's not surprisingly, I think that this omnibus bill is a $1.3 trillion omnibus bill, and a large portion of that is military expenditure. So that's not a surprise there, really. That nobody read the omnibus bill is not a surprise either, because I don't know if they ever do, really. I mean, this is one of the travesties of government, right? Is they're supposed to be representatives of somebody, but how do you represent anybody if you don't read what you're signing? If somebody's going to sign something for themselves and not read it, well, who else are they going to harm? But to sign something when you're claiming to represent somebody else and then obligate them to what you signed is complete dereliction of duty. Maybe I'm just a complete jackass, a complete fool here, and not seeing something. But my cursory understanding of contract law, it doesn't stand up for anything if you don't. You're not my representative. If you claim to have signed something, you don't have a clue what the hell you signed. Well, you can't claim to represent me. That would be my take on that. But yeah, no, they don't read 900 pages in 4 hours before they get the chance to sign it. Nobody can speed read like that, as far as I know. Now, there's one other thing, though, which I think that, and I haven't heard anybody talk about this at all yet, which is that Trumpism, as one of the things about Trump, and this is probably one of the reasons why he's been so good in business, is because, to a certain extent, negotiations involves a bit of the gambler sort of personality. You got to be able to hold something up your sleeve that the other guy can't see, right? Doesn't really know completely where you're coming from, right? And this is part of the game. And it's possible that Trump's got something up his sleeve in having signed this and realizing it can never happen. That's possible. Because, this is something that you should listen to a guy like Mike Maloney about, who's a money guy. I mean, Mike Maloney is probably one of the guys who's able to explain and who understands these sort of these fiat government money systems more than anybody. But my understanding on how these omnibus bills get funded is that the government, in some capacity, will produce bonds, and which are basically IOUs, right? So you have a bond, it's a piece of paper that says, if you buy this from me for X amount, I will promise to pay you that X amount plus interest in so many years. It's a loan, essentially, except that it's not really a loan because no money is exchanged hands. It's a promise to pay in a future time. But what if nobody buys it? That's a potential, right? My understanding is that some of the recent previous bond offerings weren't completely sold. And one of the major buyers of these bond offerings has been China, which has now come out and said it's now going to retire some of those. It's going to let some of its current holdings expire, which means that, you know, when a bond comes due, you could either buy some more, you could extend it, or you could just let it expire and say, hey, I want my money back. So if China was to let a whole bunch of its bonds expire, a bunch of its holdings from the US Treasury or whatever it is expire, then the US Treasury would owe it a lot of money. So if it was to do that, my question is, if China was intending to do that, then why would they go buy a bunch of these $1.3 trillion in bonds are going to go on the market? Why would China buy some more when it's letting its current ones expire, mature? I don't know why it would. And what if others were to do that? In other words, is there enough buyers? So maybe Trump believes, thinks. Let's suppose Trump had some sort of crystal balls. Let's just say, I mean, hypothetically. And maybe he believes he does. And sometimes it looks like he believes he does. And he could see that down the road, there's only going to be a $500 billion of these bonds sold. Well, then when he's signing that, he's not signing 1.3 trillion, is he? He's signing $500 billion. And he thinks that he can earmark that somehow into his pet projects. And some of these other ones, like Planned Parenthood and so on, that he thinks should have gotten canceled, are not going to get canceled. And he can somehow come up with a proposal because, hey, we needed this, we're going to have another shutdown. And he's going to inject his solution into how we can actually sell these bonds. Maybe offer them somewhere else or with another sweeter deal or a higher interest rate or something like that. And if these congressmen are hungry enough for their pet pork barrel, they're going to sign it with his pet projects in the back, like his wall, for example. Who knows? Could be. In any case, though, I go back and I stand by my message, and thank you, 22 people, whoever you were who watched that video originally. 22 it stands right now. One of them was myself, so that 21, because I watched it just again right now to remind myself of what it was that I talked about. But yeah, I think it still will end in tears, especially for those who were very hopeful about who they thought Trump was. I mean, because Trump is he's a Manhattan liberal, first of all, so that's his entire life, right? That's his politics. It's very hard for him to relate to a West Texan, right? Who believes that not only should you have bump stocks on your AR-15s, but that you should have full auto 50 caliber with a belt of bullets going through it. Of course, because you have the right to bear arms, right? So there's no restriction on that. Not only that, you should be able to have a Panzer tank in your garage out back. So he's not. They're not going to. I mean, they might relate in some cases, but in a lot of things they're not going to. And Trump's very expeditious. I mean, he's a businessman. Everything's open to negotiation when you're a businessman who doesn't have necessarily a whole lot of principles. Can be put aside a little bit sometimes in those cases, and I just don't know how principled Trump is really. I mean, socially he doesn't seem to be. Fiscally, he probably is quite principled. But socially, I don't know. I don't know if, the Second Amendment is extremely strong with him when he can start talking about it, bantying it around. Although, having said that, we have to remember art of the deal. Art of the deal is you can put out some crazy ideas just to divert the attention of those you're negotiating with, your adversary, to divert the attention of your adversary. You put stuff out there. So once again, this whole signing of this $1.3 trillion omnibus bill might be a giant diversion tactic. I don't know. I don't know at all. It might be, though. It might be that Trump is betting on not all of these bonds selling. So he's not actually signing 1.3. He might be signing 0.3, 0.5, 0.7. I don't know. And he might be making a calculated risk as to what he can take in terms of economic growth to counteract whatever it is that this ends up being. And it buys him a bit of time to further strategize on when the next debt ceiling or the next potential shutdown comes along, which seems to be about every year now or every 6 months or whatever, a government shutdown. And when he could say, okay, we signed this and it didn't work. Now here's what we can do. This one's going to work for us. We need this. The government's going to shut down. And in there, he can then have his important stuff put in place. And maybe then they'll sign it. This might be a strategy. I don't know. It doesn't matter, though. In my opinion, in the long run, it's probably still going to end in tears, because as long as you have socialism, which is a failed system, and it always fails because it is illogical and irrational and doesn't work, and you have a socialist running it, which you have to if you're a socialist, because nobody else, unless they are a socialist, will bother running socialism. No matter how well managed socialism is, I would say it's going to fail in the end. It's just trying to succeed with a failing system, a failing formula. It's like trying to do, like trying to be a scientist with a non-scientific method. It doesn't work. Trying to run a large organization with a system which has a track record of failure is not going to work, because it goes against the nature of humanity, right? You're never going to get on side the individuals who want freedom if you're an authoritarian. And that's how I see it. But Trump's an interesting character, and this 1.3 trillion might be something that he has up his sleeve. I don't know for sure. But nevertheless, I think that the whole Trump train, there's a good chance anyways that it will end in tears. Steve here, going to get chatting. Talk again soon. Bye for now.